Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. It was about a year ago that the then AAA rated IL&FS defaulted on its debt repayment to lenders, and it shocked India's banking and financial system. As the debt defaults of IL&FS cascaded, it was soon very clear that it was not worthy of being rated as AAA, that it was actually junk rating and it was a crumbling pack of cards. It was found that the total debt of IL&FS is to the tune of 1,34,000 crores, and it was evident that it will crumble under the dead weight of this huge debt. That point of time, there was also a realization that with every bank and financial institution having some kind of a large exposure to the IL&FS group, if this entire crisis was not handled properly, there would be a contagion effect which would destabilize India's banking and financial system. The government got into motion quickly. The existing board of directors of IL&FS was superseded and disbanded, and a new board under the chairmanship of Uday Kotak was appointed. The task before the new board was to stem the panic, was to restore confidence in the system, was to prevent a collapse of India's NBFC system, was to prevent the repayment defaults that were happening, and was to somehow rescue and revive IL&FS in order to preserve stakeholder wealth. As soon as the board was appointed, a huge presentation was made to them about the business of IL&FS, its geographical spread, its 348 subsidiaries spanning from China to Spain, and the nature of its business and financial position. It was soon clear to the new board that the entire IL&FS crisis had actually been underestimated. It was grossly underestimated. They appointed consultants to help them to sell and monetize assets. They appointed consultants in order to take over the group and look into its management. And they also appointed forensic auditors. The forensic auditors were appointed because it was clear that the audited financial statements of the IL&FS group were false. They were misleading and they concealed the reality. Everything about those statements was false except those huge liabilities and losses that they had concealed. While the forensic investigators started their investigation, so did many agencies and authorities into the IL&FS affairs, which included SFIO, CBI, ED, Income Tax Department, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, SEBI, and the Reserve Bank of India. And what came out was not a giant payment fraud or default as we thought. It was not a giant default, it was a giant corporate fraud of shocking proportion and magnitude. Like I said, only its liabilities and losses were genuine and everything else was bogus, which included the financial statements, the net worth of the group, the capital, the so-called profits, a lot of its assets, its round tripping that it did. A lot of things were not correct. The group was found to have indulged in tax evasion, money laundering, corruption, round tripping of funds, everything possible that a corporate would violate and default on. Prosecution, penalization was imminent and it started. And it was very clear that this was a fraud which was perpetrated in a very cold-blooded manner by the management headed by Ravi Parthasarathy, Hari Shankaran, Ramesh Baba and those CEOs. And their active partners and colluders were the auditors, were the independent directors, were the rating agencies, none of whom ever questioned the scammy state of affairs. Those findings came across, even though we would say that we still do not know the extent of the frauds, manipulation took place and what was the modus operandi. The manner in which the board was disbanded, it was thought that this would be yet another Satyam kind of a case. You will recall that it was a decade ago that the Satyam scam broke out because of a confession by Ramalingam Raju, and that resulted in the board of directors of Satyam being disbanded at that point of time, a new board headed by Deepak Parekh being appointed, and finally, in a very short period of time, the company was rescued, handed over to the Mahindra Group. And by that, shareholder wealth and stakeholder wealth were both protected, the enterprise was protected. So one thought that this would be another Satyam kind of case, but those two comparisons or expectations have not been correct. Satyam was not such a complicated or complex case like ILFS has been. It did not have 348 subsidiaries wherein was round tripping, money laundering, bogus financial statements, etc. Satyam had a simpler corporate structure, a simpler business. It did not have that huge debt of 1,34,000 crores. It also did not have government or quasi-government agencies and institutions as its stakeholders. It did not have the kind of powerful independent directors that ILFS had who could thwart even the best of investigation. It was simpler in all sorts compared to what ILFS has been. ILFS has been extremely complicated, complex, and as I said, we still don't know the entire story of ILFS. Investigation goes on. And one huge difference between Satyam and ILFS was, in Satyam, the promoter Mr. Raju gave a confession letter and laid out the entire scammy story and the fraud that had occurred. So it was known to the investigators what had taken place. In ILFS, they started from a scratch. At every point of time when the investigators thought that they had known the entire story, it turned out there was one more new story. They were two complicated cases involved in the entire ILFS fraud, and there was no confession letter. In fact, the kingpin or the key promoter Ravi Parthasarathi has just not been available. So Satyam was much different from ILFS, and there was very little chance of the ILFS case being the kind of resounding success in terms of takeover of the management and handing it over to a new management that Satyam had been. ILFS could never have been there. ILFS is still being investigated. As I said, the modus operandi is not known. And despite a year passing by, where are we in ILFS case? Nobody has been really paid so far. Investigations continue, prosecutions continue. Shareholder wealth has been lost. Stakeholder wealth has been lost. Lenders face imminent haircuts or probably no recovery at all. Enterprise value has been completely lost, unlike in the case of Satyam. The entire loans that were given are in such a mess, in the sense you might have no recovery and the group might just get liquidated. So the present scenario of ILFS after a year of investigation is we are still learning. We are still trying to find out what was that magnitude of the fraud and how it took place such that you might be able to ensure that some kind of recovery takes place. But one thing is sure, enterprise value has been destroyed forever, and so is the case of shareholder value and value of lenders. Satyam and ILFS have just not been comparable. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
HW News Network today is a year and a half old. Thanks to your support, thanks to your love, we've grown. We require your support a little more. What we request you to do is to download our free app. Our app is in Hindi, English and Marathi. We promise to update you with the latest news, views, analysis, interview. We also have a live TV going in that. If you download our app, we will get advertisers. And if we get advertisers, we'll get revenue. We get revenue, we can serve you better. So once again, please do support us. Please download our app. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news. Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.